Hi guys! Today I'm here with John.
Hey.
He was once the number 3 host at a host club here in Tokyo. Would you mind explaining to our viewers who may not know exactly what a host club is?
Yeah, sure thing. So a host club is like a nightclub with tables everywhere and TVs hanging down to sing karaoke. You know, it's just a place to drink and have a lot of fun. Now there's kind of a stigma behind them because there are good and bad host clubs. But from the good side, which is where I worked, usually young ladies ages 18 to 25 is the most common. They come to the club to drink, and it's pretty expensive. You know, your first time it's 5,000 yen for 2 hours, so about 40-50 bucks US. And then after that, they have to pick someone to be their host.
Okay.
So from then on, you're their dedicated entertainer whenever they come to the club. And from then on, they also pay normal prices. A bottle of beer is like $15.
Wow.
Yeah, a bottle of champagne, like Dom Perignon in the store, is about $100, $120 if you just buy the base Dom Perignon. Or Dom Perignon, that's how you say it actually. Not the Japanese way, it's Dom Perignon. But in the club, it's about 60,000 yen, about 4 or 5x.
Right.
And so we are attached to the drinks and their price.
Okay, so that's where you get paid, is through the alcohol that they buy.
And through entertaining customers.
Okay.
And so at these little tables, there'll be usually the dedicated host to the customer, and even when someone picks their host, other hosts will come over to help. Usually junior hosts, and they'll make the drinks for you and your customer.
Yeah.
We just drank a lot and played games and sang karaoke.
Right.
And so it's a very straightforward job.
What brought you to Japan in the first place?
So originally, I first came to Japan as a Mormon missionary.
Okay, so what we failed to mention at the beginning of this video is that John is an ex-Mormon.
Yeah, I first came to Japan. I mean, I had no real interest in Japan. I knew sushi and sumo and ninjas. Right. And I put in my application to become a Mormon missionary because I grew up in the church. And you don't get to choose where you go. You just say, I'm going to volunteer for 2 years. I'm going to spend about like $20,000 my own money to do this.
Wow.
And you do that.
Yeah.
You just commit to it, and they pick for you. And so then you get a letter in the mail, and they said, you're going to be going to Japan. And I was like, and the name of the
that
city...
turned out really badly for them.
I had no idea I would be a host at that time, but yeah, that's how I first came to Japan.
Okay. Did you speak any Japanese at all?
No, I actually had taken a class at BYU, so Brigham Young University. It's a Mormon college in Utah, and I'd taken a semester and I barely passed. Actually, the only reason they gave me a passing grade, a C-, was because I knew the professor, and they were good friends with my family, and she felt so bad for me. She felt so bad for me that she just said, I don't want to fail you, so I'm going to give you a C-.
Wow.
But I couldn't speak Japanese. It was so bad.
Wow, okay. So you came here as a missionary, not really speaking Japanese, and how did that go for you?
Right, I mean, it's really hard.
Right, yeah, Japan's not a very religious country, and they're not interested, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I could have done a lot better, knowing the culture a lot better now, and knowing how to sell better now. But you know, first, I'm not Japanese, so come right across as weird. And then, you know, religion has quite a stigma in Japan. There's been a lot of really freaky stuff happening that's been associated with religions. And I'm not talking about Shintoism or Buddhism, because that's less of a religion in my opinion. It's more of a cultural undertone.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about like Christian religions are generally quite radical here.
Yeah.
And so because of that, there's quite a bit of resistance and people feel quite uncomfortable. So pretty difficult. Plus, you know, just as a foreigner and someone that's not used to Japan, I wasn't immediately enjoying my life here.
Right.
It takes some time to get used to, and I was buying peanut butter for the first 3 months because I couldn't eat sushi.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite rough, but I came to love it.
And you've been here how long now?
Total, both my trips, I didn't actually go directly from Mormon missionary to host.
Yeah.
I had a nice clean break between there. About 9 years or so total in Japan.
Okay, alright. So what took you from Mormon missionary to host?
Right. I came here and I realized that people are really good here. Japanese people are wonderful people in general. And I was trying to tell them that they needed my message to be better people. And I just didn't agree with myself after several months of this. And, like a professional wrestler, he joined the church because of me.
Oh, really?
And he joined, but then he didn't understand the concept of not being able to drink beer. And so he kept drinking beer after. And it was just always really hard to tell him that he could not be a good person if he drank beer, even though he was a really good person.
Yeah.
and like this lady that worked at a train shop, and this retired guy that was a photographer, and they're all really wonderful people. And what I came to realize was, maybe there's a different way to life than what I've been brought up.
Okay.
So that really kind of transformed me.
Right. Complete failure as a Mormon missionary.
Well, relatively speaking, I did quite well with the people that we did work with.
Okay.
Japan is one of the hardest places to go, actually, because Christian religion is not very big here.
At that point, you sort of left the church, I'm guessing?
I didn't want to cause any trouble for my family or anyone in the church here. And certainly I didn't want to be deported because I wanted to come back. So, I made a clean cut. I left all proper and officially. I paid back my plane ticket because the church initially bought it for me and everything. And so I went home to school where I studied to be a doctor for 2 years.
Wow. This is a really fascinating life.
Yeah, so I took a 3-year break between these two trips. I worked for a year, and then I went to college for 2 years, and then I had a chance to come back to Japan with some scholarships and basically spend 1 year here. And so I wanted to do that before I applied to med school, which didn't ever happen.
You just came here and then you stayed.
I just did. I didn't ever leave.
So you came here. Was like host club the first thing you went to as a job? You just
No.
got here?
No, I originally didn't plan on that. I mean, I came here because I really love Japan from my experience. I love the people. I thought they're really wonderful people, and I just wanted to experience it as not a missionary.
So then what made you decide to join a host club?
So I lived in a dorm in Osaka. So I studied abroad in Osaka in the Kansai area. And in the dorm, I noticed a really disturbing trend, which is people would go to school and they would take their Japanese classes and they'd come back and they'd watch Arrested Development in the dorm, or they'd play Wii, or they play Magic the Gathering, and I love all those things.
Right.
I just couldn't handle that though, because I was setting aside a year of my time.
Right.
And in my opinion at that time, I thought I only had 1 year to basically make it count. Actually, I didn't take classes with everyone because I was already to about the N2 level, maybe borderline N1 at the time.
Okay.
As a Mormon missionary, you get really good really quickly. So I had gotten really good, and I was taking classes with Japanese students, actually. And so I saw this disturbing trend, and winter break was coming.
Right.
So I'd have like a month and a half of no school. And everyone had all these plans. They'd go home, or they'd marathon all these TV shows. Like, I wanted to be like the ramen girl, right? I wanted to work at a ramen shop, actually.
Oh, really?
Or an izakaya. I wanted to just be a waiter.
Yeah.
And also a lot of people, they teach English under the table, part-time.
Right.
And the money is decent. I mean, it's like $20 an hour for a student. That's decent. But I didn't come all the way to Japan to teach English. I came here to study the language. And so I refused to do that as well. I wanted to get a normal job.
Right.
But the thing is, I didn't have a visa, for one, and then two, I approached quite a few of these places, and they would give me the old, like, chotto. And I spoke fluent Japanese, and we had a perfect conversation. I told them what I was doing, and I had a few jokes in there to break the ice. But when it came down to me working with them, they had a problem with it. I was in a party club at school. So all these guys had really long blonde hair.
A party club. So there was a club for people who like to party.
Yeah, they call it asobi sakura in Japanese. It's called play circle.
Right.
Circles in Japanese colleges are basically clubs.
Clubs, right.
And you do something like play tennis or basketball, and then it also gives you a reason to drink once a week. And so some of these guys in it, they worked as hosts.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so I came to them with my nayami,
your problem.
my issue, right? And I said, I want to work in Japan. I want to do something fun to practice the language, but no one lets me. And they're like, oh, I know what you'd be good at, John. And I was like, what? He said, you should be a host. I was like, okay, I've heard of this, but that's kind of crazy, man. And they were like really sold me on it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so they kind of gave me the rundown how to approach these places and how to dress. They said, don't dress all flashy when you go into the interview, for example. Kind of go in there and just speak Japanese like you do, and tell them what your purpose is and what you want to do. So that's what I did.
Okay.
That's how I started it.
Wow.
And that's the sole reason why I first became a host. But I mean, this was in Osaka.
Yeah.
So I was also a host in Kabukicho as well.
Okay. How difficult was it for you getting hired by a host club, especially as a foreigner?
Right. So in Osaka, it was very difficult.
Oh, really?
So I basically had to prove myself in Osaka. And so I do one video where I talk about that interview. And in essence, they had me pick up a girl off the streets of Dotonbori.
Seriously?
To prove myself.
What the heck? This is so crazy.
Yeah.
So, he has a channel too, which we haven't mentioned yet. It's called
Book of Host.
Book of Host. So he tells a lot of stories about being a host there and gives you a lot of information. So definitely go check that out if you want to hear more details.
Yeah, I try to go into the aspect of coming out of a religion like being a Mormon and then going into something like a host club.
So you had to pick up a girl off the streets and apparently succeeded, and then they let you into the host club.
Yeah, they took me back to the host club and they kind of told me the payout and the conditions. I signed a contract and they asked for my passport and I was like, no, I'm not going to give you that. And they said, why? And I was like, I don't want to say why, but I just want to separate my life. And so I worked illegally, basically. I didn't have a visa to do it.
Right. So Mormon to illegal host worker in questionable Japanese industry.
That's one way to put it. I like to refer myself as a social worker.
So, okay, all right, social worker. Did they ever expect you to talk to people in English, or was it all Japanese?
Yeah, so in both Osaka and Tokyo, I worked in normal Japanese host clubs, and so everyone was Japanese.
Okay.
And I had to speak all in Japanese. Every now and then, someone would want to talk English to me, and it was probably the most expensive English lesson they had. And other times, it would just be kind of like a joke.
Right.
So at the time, like Obama was coming up as the president, and I created my own drinking call, which is the "Yes We Can" drinking call. When it was time to chug a bottle of champagne or just a beer, we'd all chant "Yes we can, yes we can," and so it became part of my routine of sorts.
Oh, okay.
Originally, actually, my first name was Taro in the Osaka club.
Okay.
And I guess I tried too hard to be Japanese when I first came back to Japan, and it didn't help me at all. And that's when I switched to Michael when I was working as a host in Kabukicho.
Okay.
Because I realized how I could play to my strengths. And I realized that I would never be Japanese and no one would take me as Japanese.
Right.
So I leveraged what I had as best as I could.
All right, yeah, so you learn how to play to your assets.
In the business, whether you're a host or a hostess, or if you're on TV, there's a term called genjime. And so it's your performing name, and as a way to kind of keep things private and have a degree of separation between you and your clients, you pick a name.
Right.
And since I'm obviously not Japanese, I chose Michael because I just thought it would be cool.
Because Michael, it's like such an ordinary sounding name. I've heard a lot of hosts have names in Japanese, like kanji, that ends up meaning like Dark Knight or something like weird like that, and then Michael. So.
Well, the real reason was at the time, this was back in like 2008 or 2007 to 2009 is when I was working, and Prison Break was big. So so Michael Scofield was huge, and so what I wanted to go for was a name that Japanese people were already used to.
Right.
It was very easy for them to say, and they had a really good connection with the name.
Clever.
And since he was a very attractive man, I wanted to pick something that they would immediately have good feelings about.
Right. Okay. Good. All right. That makes a lot of sense. Was there any tension with you being like a foreign host there compared to like everyone else is like, but I'm Japanese versus foreign guy?
Yeah, definitely. So there's some tension because I'm foreign and I tend to be the stereotypical American, blonde hair, blue eye,
right,
tall American that everyone sees, right? Like the number one hosts, like they took me under their wings basically, and they introduced clients directly to me.
Okay.
They would take me out to parties, so I had an upper hand,
right,
because my trump card. And so for every like weakness I had competing with them, I also had some unfair advantage. And so some people took that the wrong way, and they would badmouth me to new potential clients or my clients.
Oh, that's so catty.
Yeah, so I got in a few fights, so then I was fined 50,000 yen for it. And
like fist fights?
yeah, I mean, just like, because you're drinking all night,
right,
and you're a red-blooded male, right? And so tempers fly, of course, and so there's this big background where all the booze is stored, and so you'll usually get into it back there. And
your life should be a movie.
I don't know about that, but
that's so interesting.
It was definitely hard work.
Yeah. So they would just badmouth you and.
Yeah. So the worst thing that you can call a host or any worker in that trade, the Mizushobai trade, is basically makura eigyo. You say that they do makura eigyo, which is the pillow business.
Yeah.
Which means you sleep with your customers for money. And that is not the objective of being a host. Like, let's get that out there before you comment on this. Hosts are not gigolos. Okay? So that's the worst thing possible. And when someone says that basically defaces your value.
Oh, okay.
And when that happens, people don't want to pick you anymore. And being one of the very few foreigners in Kabukicho that have done this, and there's a few others as well, the word will get out quickly, and I don't want to be associated with that.
Right,
of course.
right.
So that was one of the worst things that can happen. And this one guy who I was first initially cleaning toilets with, and he was kind of training me in the ways of the club. I rose significantly faster than him in the club, and he took it not too well, and so I always feel bad about that, but yeah, it happens.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a difficult business. Part of that comes down to your ability to like sell yourself. So.
Right. I mean, that's what the word means. Mizushobai. It doesn't mean the water trade as in you're selling drinks.
Right.
It actually means the money you make is like water. It's fluid. Some days it's great. Some days it's not.
So that does happen then. There are some hosts who actually do act as like they will sleep with their clients or...
Right, yeah, some will do that. Like I dated one of my clients at one point. And then,
oh, wow.
And like some of the hosts would be like, you shouldn't be taking this girl to your host club. I'm like, it's okay, she's a hostess. But she was like, she worked at this really well-known hostess club that like some like B-list actresses
whoa, wow.
worked at when they were paying for their acting career. And so some of the hosts would be like, oh, you shouldn't be taking your girlfriend here. I'm like, it's okay, we're both in the biz. That's a pretty common situation. Like you'll date a girl seriously. And one guy, when he was leaving the business, his wife was also a cabaret girl, and so they both worked in the business, and she was a customer of his, and that's how they first met. So
okay.
So there's kind of like a happy ending to some of these tales, actually.
That's good. How much do hosts typically make then?
So when you're starting out, you don't make anything really. I was a student, and so I was pretty hungry, and you get a base stipend of 5,000 yen a day, but then they take about 1,500 yen away from that for various random costs. And of course they can do that because this is a 100% legitimate business, right? And so you always have these weird deductions from your 5,000 yen a day. And so the way you make money, there are a few ways, is obviously get paying customers to come and pay for the hourly charge, and then also buy drinks, which you'll get a percent of. So 30-35% is pretty common.
Okay.
And then you can work your way up to 40% when you sell more,
Okay.
which is what I eventually got to. But before then, you can also go out on the streets and pick up girls. And for every one girl you bring into the club, to the competition where everyone can go after her as getting picked as their host, you get 5,000 yen per girl. And so when you first start out, that's your bread and butter, basically.
Yeah.
And you also get paid it on the spot. So being a student, that was super awesome because I tried so hard on the streets to pick up girls. I learned like comedy skits at the time, back in 2007, 2008. The like Sono no Kanka Nai guy, this one comedian had the skit. He was really popular, so I would just like do his skit on the street. I would go up to girls and just do it in front of them. And then I'd be like, "Won't you come drink with me at our club?" And I just was super hungry. Because I could bring in 8 girls a night and get paid like $400.
Okay.
So
That's crazy.
So there's that aspect when you're lower in the club and you're building your client base.
Right.
And then once they start coming in, then you get a more steady stream. And like for me, an average night was anywhere between like 50,000 to 100,000 yen.
Wow.
Because I would juggle like 2 or 3 customers at the same time in the club. And the average check size was at least 30,000 yen. So
wow.
You make money when your customers order more and more.
Right.
And so that takes a bit more skill and more work. There's 2 ways to get customers as a host. One, you can go out and get them yourself.
Oh, recruit them off the streets.
Right. Or 2 is you can just compete. Right. And so whenever a new customer comes in off the street via advertisement or during your job, when you're starting out, you have to go out on the street and recruit girls there. You'll basically have 2 hours to compete with all the other hosts. And it's pretty hard because, I mean, I'm not speaking my own language for one. And these guys are very aggressive. I mean, these guys are top sales folk. I mean, some of my friends went on to be really top selling pharmaceutical sales guys or real estate agents.
Okay.
They open their own businesses. Yeah. They open an ad agency. Like, these guys know what they're doing, and so you really have to play to your strengths, otherwise you don't win.
Okay.
And so that's one interesting aspect. And so this 2-hour period of time, you have to kind of pick when is a great time to go in as a quick intro, and when you want to get in before they pick their host at the end of their 2 hours, or maybe you just don't go at all because you're dealing with your own customer, and just by chance they see your photo in the book when it's time to pick, or they see you the whole time drinking champagne with another girl, and they want that, right?
Right.
So kind of you have to understand human psyche enough to know what works for each customer to win them. And so so many times I would just completely ignore a table of like 4 girls, and then 1 or 2 of them would pick me because I completely shunned them the whole time, right? I was the mysterious foreigner, and I ignored them the whole time, and I was just drinking champagne, chugging it, and whatnot. And so they would pick me, even though they had never talked to me. Yeah. And so it was really, really interesting.
Wow, that seems like that would be really good experience in kind of like a weird way then for getting better at being a salesperson and like presenting yourself.
Yeah, I first learned it as a Mormon missionary. The only non-religious books that I was allowed to read were like Dale Carnegie books, which are great books on sales, for example.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I really kind of learned that approach. And it is a really good way to kind of develop those skills because you might be juggling 3 customers at one time in a club for 6-7 hours. And if there's a special event or a party, like someone's birthday party or their last day in the host club, it'll be like 10 hours. And so you have to always come up with topics. You have to always be reading the tabloids and have some sort of piece of conversation ready. Right. It takes a lot of really strong sales skills.
Yeah, I can imagine. That seems really difficult. That's where your social work comes in.
Yeah, in Japan I don't really hear a lot about psychologists or people going to them. I have some friends in Tokyo that actually go to a foreign psychologist, but it's not a common thing here. And so I almost kind of wonder if different places like this act as that. Because I would hear some really messed up things.
They would just come in and talk about their problems.
Yeah, I heard the background, like why they were in Osaka or why they were in Tokyo. It was very interesting. It actually reminded me more about being a Mormon missionary than any other job I had. There's the selling part, which is in there, right? And then there's the just making someone feel better part. And so that's why I say there's the good and bad of the host club. Some host clubs get a bad name because they really push the drink sales on the customers, can rack up debt for them.
Oh, okay, right.
So there's a stigma for that reason. And then the other side is, they're really fun places, they're proper establishments, and the hosts themselves aren't really pushed that hard to do that.
Okay.
And so it all depends on how you approach your customers.
Right.
And creating connections with them.
Okay. Do they get really attached to their hosts?
Right, yeah, they do. It becomes a relationship. Not in the traditional sense, but as like a human-to-human relationship.
Right.
And the type of people that do come, they usually they have a lot of disposable income. And so they work in an industry where they get that. In Japanese, it's koshunyo baito. But what that means is, they work as hostesses or cabaret girls or even in many cases prostitutes. And because I was working from midnight to like 6, 7 a.m. or from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m., all these women would finish their jobs and then they would take the $2,000 they made that day or whatever it was, and they wanted to party and they wanted to forget what they did, or they wanted to objectify a man for a change.
Okay, right.
These are people that are not in the normal Japanese society, and in many cases the reason they're not is because they didn't make it in. They could be high school dropouts, or they could have been kicked out of their home, or they had an abusive dad, or something like that. And the whole reason they're working is because they had no other choice. It was either kind of make it big or don't make it at all. And so talking with each of those people has probably been my favorite experiences there, is just kind of just hearing about their stories.
Yeah.
And then, you just learn completely new perspectives on really stupid things such as like onigiri and fried chicken.
Yeah.
You'll be out on the streets. So one story is when I was in Osaka, it gets pretty cold in Japan during the winter, and I was on the streets picking up girls in the winter. I mean, it's kind of hard. We'd go into a convenience store and I'd buy fried chicken, and then the other guys would say, "Oh, are you going to get bread or an onigiri, some rice?" And they would say, "You're going to get bread, right? To go with your fried chicken." And I'd say, "No, I'm going to get some onigiri." And he said, "Oh, but Japanese people like that." And so it was always just fun kind of destroying people's stereotypes.
Right.
And also just kind of talking with people about silly things like onigiri versus bread. And the reasons why and what they like to eat it with. And so those are probably my fondest experiences. Or memories, rather.
I guess that's a really real way to connect with people. So you ended up working your way up to the number 3 spot in your club. What's that like, being like a top host?
Yeah, so being a top host, it's called the kanbu. This term is used in many instances in companies, in Naruto, right? I mean, it's like the upper echelon of whatever. You get treated differently. You don't have to clean. You don't have to do all the crappy stuff involved with being a host. Your first day, you're cleaning the toilet. You're literally wiping puke off a toilet seat, and it's horrible. I mean, you have to clean it spick and span, like under the seat too. That's the worst part. And so, like the whole time when you're doing this, and you're setting up for the club, and when you do like a champagne tower with all the glasses, you have to put that up. But when you're in the kanbu, you don't have to do any of that, and you don't have to come to work so early. You also always be on dates with your customers before the club hours, of course. But it's super nice because you don't have to do the crappy work. And you also get paid more as well. As you work your way up, you get a higher percentage. You get access to like the VIP room and all the good things. Each month, basically, there's an earnings call, and everyone sits around these tables. They kind of push the tables together, and you have an order, and they call out from number 1 all the way down to about number 10 or so. Then all the other like 15 hosts are basically just it's based upon seniority at that point. Because they don't earn enough to really matter. But that's a little bit cold. But yeah, you basically, getting to move from like the very bottom to like the first month you're there to like the top 10 feels really good. Because everyone hates you for it. And you're just like, You mentioned before that you would do like karaoke. You like learn pop songs and like, get the moves down. Yeah, like the host club scene has changed in the 7-8 years since I first came to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was singing DJ Ozuma and dancing to DJ Ozuma songs. So like the Spider-Man song, if you know that. So we basically like take off our jackets and our shirt and our pants, and we just like dance on stage with fog machines and the music to Spider-Man Junior right now. So if you search it on YouTube, see Spider-Man the dance. And that was like my favorite song to dance to. But we danced to like all the DJ Ozuma songs, and so like a customer could order us to dance, and if they paid even extra, we just strip down to our boxers. So it's all about having fun.
Right.
It was a good time. And karaoke, all like anime songs, and everyone always asked me to sing Backstreet Boys and those songs, and so that was always ridiculous.
You're playing out their boy band fantasy.
playing out, they'd be like, "Oh, you just kind of like Lance, maybe," and it's like, "No, I don't want to be Lance." So, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was a lot of fun. It was just hanging out with friends is what I would describe working as a host.
Right. What was the craziest night you had in the host club?
Probably the craziest story. The one story when I thought I've gone too deep, and what am I doing? It's not just women that come to the club. Oftentimes you'll get rich old men bring women, hostesses, with them to the club to be entertained because they're not interesting people, and we are. And so you'd be there entertaining a guy and the girls he brought to the club. And I was entertaining this one guy. He had 4 hostesses he brought with him. It was really difficult to straddle the line between my normal sales technique, which is kind of approaching in a more of a kind of a lovey-dovey kind of way, and like picking up a girl sort of thing, versus making sure this guy doesn't kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah, at one point he said he had a gun, and
it
just got crazy out of hand. And then I learned later that he had some ties with some nefarious individuals, and
oh goodness.
When you're working as a host, it's all about the service, and so I will basically escort girls to the bathroom, and then when you escort the girl to the bathroom, you're just waiting outside with an oshibori, this wet towelette, a steam towel, for when they get out they can kind of wipe their hands with it. And so you bring them to the bathroom, and this girl like was trying to pull me inside with her, and I was all like, no, I can't do this. I don't want to get killed. Like, there's this crazy dude here, and you're trying to make me do something. and in general, as a host, you want customers to come back, so doing something like that gives them what they want, and you want them to come back after that. So I wouldn't want to do anything, and so she kept like pulling me into the bathroom and like trying to kiss me and stuff, and I was like stop.
Wow.
And so that was probably the scariest night of my life as a host, because
the guy with the gun.
Because the guy, he was really drunk, and he was like, "Oh, you're from Tennessee," and I told him my hobbies, like I'd been hunting before and I'd fish, and he said, "I have a gun," and everyone's just like, "What?" And I was like, "Let's drink," and it was just kind of crazy, you know?
Wow.
It's one of those moments where I thought, oh gosh, what am I doing?
Wow. So if you don't know, guns are illegal here in Japan. You can get a hunting rifle or a shotgun if you have very difficult to get permit, specifically for hunting. But no pistols, no handguns, nothing else. So that's pretty much saying, that's pretty much saying I'm really in the other side of things here in Japan.
Yeah, that was Osaka too, and people from Osaka are pretty hardcore. They're scary.
You're drinking with your clients, so you probably drink a lot.
Yes.
While you're there. So what kind of things do you end up drinking?
Really huge range of drinks. I've drank limited edition champagnes by Louis Vuitton.
Wow.
I've drank normal champagne. I've drank fruit champagne. That's kind of like the celebration drink, though, champagne. Whereas the common daily drink that everyone kind of puts out there to drink is shochu. And then we usually mix it with some tea or water or orange juice or even milk tea, even kind of whatever the customer wants to drink it with. And then beer is really common as well.
Okay.
But there's one key difference about beer in a host club versus just going to a bar is we mix ice with it because it kind of softens the carbonation and it kind of lengthens the time that it takes to drink a bottle of beer.
Okay.
But yeah, we drank everything.
Yeah.
I've had some pretty amazing stuff. But carbonation is usually kind of the thing that I get tired of, and so I usually prefer like the whiskeys and wine and that sort of thing.
Yeah. What was the most expensive thing you've had to drink?
I think that's Camu Jubilee. It's this really high-end cognac. It was like $10,000 or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you had a client who came in, they spent $10,000.
Yeah.
On that drink.
So it wasn't my client for that.
Okay.
The highest that my client has ever spent was like 300,000 yen for a drink. And
okay.
It was also cognac, actually.
Yeah.
It was called the Invincible. It's the shape of a ship.
Great.
But so not everything's just like a one-night affair. So lots of meanings for that. But when they buy a really nice bottle of cognac, obviously you don't want to drink that in a single night. What you'll do is you'll put a tag around the top of the bottle, and then the client can come back and drink it whenever they want. And so they place it on the table as a trophy.
Right.
It's kind of like, oh, look at me.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
And so I've drank like every alcohol there is. But personally, I just like craft beer and wine.
Right.
I really hate champagne. Because you have to chug that, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't remember the club hours, really.
Yeah.
You drink so much, it's definitely toxic.
Right.
It feels like that whole period of my life, someone just took like an ice cream scoop to my brain, and
it's gone.
It's just like patchy memories.
Right. How are you functioning by the end of the night after drinking so much?
Well, so we force ourselves to throw up, actually.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the big secret.
Yeah.
So we'll do that many times a night, but even that, it gets to you, specifically the carbonation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of techniques to get around that, and so I have some videos I call Host Club 101 on my channel where I talk about some hacks for drinking like a host. And no one probably ever needs to know this.
Right.
I am not condoning over drinking. Like, please, no one die because of me. Sorry. But, like, probably one of the worst times that happened to me was when I was first starting out. I refused to throw up. I was like, I don't want to become bulimic. This is weird. And then I woke up. It was like noon. I was in the management office of the host club.
Oh my God.
I was on the floor. There was, like, puke on my jacket, and they had dragged me in there because I had just blacked out. And,
wow.
And there was like a water bottle spilled over next to me, and I had no idea what happened. And so like from then on, I learned to puke. So.
Wow. Would you consider yourself a pickup artist?
No, I am not a pickup artist. I am married. I don't really like that whole scene. I've kind of run into those people before that have mentioned this when they found out about what I did, and they've actually asked me, and they offered me money to actually teach in their seminars, and I refused it because I just don't think that's a very good thing, and it's so far attached from what I actually did, which is, just have fun with people. That's why I consider myself a social worker or an entertainer, because the objectives are completely different. Yeah. So. Okay. That makes sense. Not a pickup artist. Yeah.
Would you consider like other hosts that you did work with pickup artists though?
Well, there's definitely those people in the business that have maybe that mindset, but they're not the successful ones. Okay. So the kanbu, again, I mean the top selling hosts, they generally have really strong objectives for doing the job. They want to open up their own business. Some of them had wives, some of them had families. Everyone has a story, and I'm not sure if they were real stories looking back on it, because I had my own story too. But, the guys that are doing it just to get girls and the guys that have an objective, there's a clear gap in their success levels. So.
All right. I can imagine that. Yeah. Because you definitely seem like you are really actually interested in these people and like learning about them and, that human connection relationship sort of thing.
Yeah, and until you do that, I mean, it's all about love and not in like a risque sense. It's all about just like caring about the people, and when they're not in their club, calling them up, and when they have a cold, bringing them cold medicine and stuff, and creating those really strong ties. That will, there's money behind it, but also you care about the people. Yeah. So you would talk to these people outside of work hours too? Yeah, definitely. That's probably like 90% of the work. Oh wow. Like I had my own phone dedicated to this, and it was just like constant mailing back and forth. This is before the app days. This is before the iPhone picked up. And actually, one of my customers bought me an iPhone, but I thought it was so hard to use because I couldn't type fast enough. So I just kept using my normal feature phone because I could mail girls so much faster. Yeah. And so there's a lot of that involved.
Were you dating while you were a host?
No, I didn't really have time, and that's why I dated one of my customers. Was my girlfriend at the time, and since broken up, of course. My wife was not my customer, so everyone asked me that.
How did you end up then making your, I don't want to say escape, but making your way out of this business?
You got to know what you want to get out of it.
Right.
So even now, like in my career, I've worked in different companies, and each time I knew what I wanted out of that and what I wanted to grow from it. And as a host, I had a specific objective. I wanted to afford going to college in Tokyo, and it was the financial crisis at the time. So the reason I quit, one of those reasons was I had a few job offers, and I wanted to actually develop skills beyond being able to drink.
Right. Okay, well that seems like a success story, because now I would consider you quite successful.
Yeah, I majored in economics and finance.
In finance.
And one of my job offers was an investment bank, and so I joined a bank, and I was in a startup, and I've been in a few pretty big startups and tech companies since then, and then I have my own business. And so I think the job and the place, they don't make the person.
Right.
Like Japan, a lot of people I meet, they come to Japan because they think it'll fix their problems.
Yeah.
When it's the reverse, it starts with you wanting to fix your problems and then finding a route for that.
Right.
And so for me, going to college in Tokyo was a really opportune time to use my language ability and also my work experience, which is selling. And so
that seems like it would be an interesting bit of experience to put on your resume too. Explaining.
That's how I got one of my jobs. I got a few jobs telling them about it. Like, when you're in an interview, there's really no rules.
Right.
Especially when you get so far in an interview and it's just down to like you and another person, and it's all about differentiating yourself at that point. And so I remember both at the bank and then this one really big startup that was launching in Asia, in the interview I sensed that they weren't interested in me. And so I took out my iPhone and I pulled up my host picks I had saved, and I said, but I also know how to sell. Like, I don't think you understand how hard I will work for you. And they said, wait, what do you mean? Like, and I said, well, what if I told you in college I was paid to drink with Japanese women from ages 18 to 25? And they said, what? You're paid to drink? Well, like, what does that have to do with this? I'm like, I know how to sell. I'll show you. And then, like, it got them interested in me.
Right.
And it wasn't until that like I actually was going to get those jobs. And looking back and talking to these people again, they say, "Oh, I just thought you were really interesting and you really knew how to work hard because what you told me."
Yeah.
And that's what got me in the door at a few jobs. So you'd be amazed at what work experience is actually applicable.
Right. But that's not because he was a host. He's a very motivated person. Like, you have to have that motivation and like the work ethic first.
Yeah, and I didn't display this till like the final interview. It was basically your final appeal beyond your role-related knowledge and all that stuff. So don't think that you can walk into like an investment bank and say, "I was the host, hire me." I actually had to take all these online tests with like statistics and complicated math to actually get to the first interview. It's really hard. So don't misunderstand this.
So you did really well for yourself, but you also hinted at, like, you saw where some other people ended up. So I'm guessing that's not the story for other people who work in this business. Right.
I mean, I really feel bad for Japanese people because the society restrains them so much with stigmas and norms, and if you don't go to the right college or whatnot, you just basically are kicked out of the system.
Right.
And I mean, it's a whole world if you go out there. I'm not talking about the establishments themselves, I'm talking about the people. The restaurants they eat at, I mean, they're not open when we're awake. They're open at 6 a.m. and they're still serving yakiniku. I mean, there's a whole different world. And so usually the transition is into another area of that world. So they'll open a restaurant or a bar or they'll continue helping out with these establishments.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of interesting to see that. Obviously, you can find success in any realm. And if you open your own restaurant after saving up all this money, you can be very successful.
Right.
Other people that aren't as successful, they're just trapped in this endless loop of going from job to job, and so it doesn't fare so well. So I've seen both success stories and I've seen sadder stories.
Right. And from what you were saying, it sounds like the top hosts, they were the ones who were really good with their sales skills, and they ended up working in like really good sales positions in other areas.
Right. On the flip side, the girls that would come to the club, they're the ones that don't end up that well because they're blowing their money in many cases.
Right.
Whereas the ones that actually open their own club, they do very, very well.
Host clubs, to a lot of people, kind of have like a shadier image. So how shady is this business really? Like,
right. So it's like any other business, really. So there are shady real estate businesses and there are shady restaurants. And so this world in particular is no different in that there are the popular clubs. So I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you were to want to go to a host club, and I don't think they would entertain you really if you don't speak Japanese fluently. They kind of look at you as more of a burden and might not let you in. But the more popular clubs are usually the more legitimate ones, and so I chose a popular one.
Yeah.
And they don't really do anything wrong. I mean, it's just a standard business. It's like going to a really nice restaurant. Or going to a normal club.
Okay.
And there might be some connections in the back.
Right.
And some clubs do nothing but rip people off, especially if you're going to get talked to in the streets of Roppongi. Don't ever go to those places if they're talking to you on the street. But there's also legitimate ones, and those are the ones that they're usually not selling so hard in the street, and they're usually there's big billboards up about them.
Okay.
And you go there in business meetings. Like I've gone to cabarets for business in Kyushu or Osaka, and it's just a part of business culture here. I would say it's kind of a slippery slope fallacy in foreign media that like all hostess clubs and all host clubs deal with human trafficking and all this horrible stuff.
Yeah.
When that's just like a small percentage.
Right.
And those places usually get shut down.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because this is actually a sanctioned business by the government, and they'll do checks. If you're doing something bad, sometimes they catch you.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that's just like a media thing. They find one person or club or business that does something, and then suddenly it's an epidemic in this country, So.
I mean, they make their money off of
right.
ads. But yeah, I mean, you have to actually get a license to open a host club, and you get your license from the government. So
thank you for being here and answering all our questions and teaching us a little bit about the host industry. I'll refer everyone to your channel, which is
Book of Host.
Book of Host, and he's writing a book, so keep an eye out for that. But he'll be sharing lots more stories, like things we didn't cover here.
Yeah, this book will also be written by everyone's comments as well. So if you have questions about it, then I'll make sure to include that in the book and future videos as well, because everything's so normal to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what's cool.
All right, well, thank you very much for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank
Bye.
you. See you. So I had my goal, I had my mission set. I would find a job in Osaka, Japan, and I would use it to further my understanding of Japanese culture